At 9:17 on a Tuesday night, sitting alone in my little condo in Spokane, Washington, I watched my daughter show off a $42,000 kitchen renovation on Instagram. The strange part wasn't the kitchen. The strange part was that I recognized every cabinet. I recognized the tiny crescent-shaped scratch beside the sink. I recognized the brushed brass handles my late wife spent 3 weeks choosing. I even recognized the slight color mismatch in one corner panel that only 2 people on Earth knew existed. One of those people was dead. The other was me. Stay with me here, because that was the moment I realized my daughter wasn't showing off a renovation. She was showing off my kitchen. But cabinets remember things better than people do. Before we get into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what your local time is right now. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel and who's listening along. And if you enjoy real-life inspired family drama, quiet revenge, and stories about ordinary people who refuse to be pushed around, consider subscribing to the channel. We'd be glad to have you here. Now let me tell you how I discovered that my own daughter had stolen something far more valuable than a set of cabinets. My name is Elliott Jenkins. I'm 66 years old, widowed, retired, and according to my daughter Lauren, dangerously stubborn. To be fair, she's not completely wrong. I still drive a silver 2009 Ford Ranger with 213,000 miles on it. I still own flannel shirts older than some marriages. And I still keep paper copies of documents that everyone else insists should be stored in the cloud. The cloud. You know you're getting old when a word that used to mean rain suddenly starts holding your tax records. I live in Spokane, Washington, in a modest 2-bedroom condo, about 10 minutes from Providence Sacred Heart Medical Center. It's quiet, comfortable, easy to maintain. But it isn't home. Home was a white craftsman-style house on West 19th Avenue. Home was where my wife Maggie and I spent 34 years building a life together. I need you to understand something before we go any further. The kitchen wasn't valuable because it was expensive. The kitchen was valuable because it was Maggie. Every inch of it, every cabinet, every drawer, every decision. Maggie Jenkins was the kind of woman who could spend 45 minutes comparing paint samples and somehow enjoy every second of it. She loved details. She loved making ordinary things beautiful. When we got married in 1988, we had almost nothing. Our first apartment had orange countertops that looked like they had survived a nuclear event. The refrigerator made noises that sounded medically concerning, and the kitchen cabinets leaned slightly to the left. Not enough to fall. Just enough to make you nervous. We laughed about it for years. Back then, we promised each other that one day we'd have a real home. Not a mansion, not anything fancy, just ours. And eventually we did. We bought the house on West 19th Avenue in 1992. The place needed work. A lot of work. The roof leaked. The plumbing was questionable. And the kitchen looked like it had been decorated during a period of American history everyone preferred to forget. But Maggie saw potential. That's what she always saw. Potential. Over the years, we fixed things one project at a time. A new roof, new windows, updated flooring, fresh paint. The kind of improvements ordinary people make when they're paying cash and watching every dollar. Then, in 2015, Maggie received a diagnosis that changed everything. Breast cancer. For a while we fought it together. Surgeries, treatments, appointments, hope, fear, more hope, then more fear. Life becomes very simple when someone you love is sick. Suddenly all the things you thought mattered don't matter at all. One evening in early 2016, we were sitting at our kitchen table drinking coffee. Maggie looked around the room and said something I'll never forget. "Elliott, if we're going to do this kitchen, let's do it while I can still enjoy it." Not dramatic, not sad, just practical. That was Maggie. So we did. We spent almost $19,000, specifically $18,742.60. Yes, I remember the exact amount. You'll understand why later. The custom cabinets came from a family-owned workshop outside Yakima. Cherry wood, soft close hinges, hand-finished panels, brushed brass handles Maggie selected after what felt like 17 years of research. Actually, it was 3 weeks, but trust me, it felt longer. Every Saturday we drove around looking at samples. Every evening we compared finishes. And every time I thought we'd made a decision, Maggie found 3 more options. If you're married, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you're not married, congratulations on all the free time you still have. By the fall of 2016, the kitchen was finished. And it was beautiful. Not magazine beautiful, not celebrity beautiful, real beautiful. The kind of room where people naturally gathered. The kind of room where Thanksgiving dinners lasted for hours. The kind of room where grandchildren sat on stools eating cookies. The kind of room where life happened. For 6 years after that, Maggie enjoyed every single inch of it. Then in 2022, I lost her. Even now, saying those words feels strange. You spend 34 years with someone and suddenly the entire world changes shape. People tell you grief gets easier. I don't think that's true. I think you just learn how to carry it. Some days it's heavier than others. After Maggie passed away, Lauren started visiting more often. At first, I appreciated it. She's our only child. When she was little, she was funny and curious and fearless. The kind of kid who asked questions every 30 seconds. The kind of kid who once tried to convince me that our golden retriever should be allowed to vote. I adored her. Still do. That's part of what makes this story difficult. Because villains are easy, children aren't. Lauren wasn't evil. She was complicated. By the time she turned 38, she was married to Tyler Parker and living in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Nice house, nice neighborhood, nice social media presence, very important distinction. Those aren't always the same thing. At first, I didn't notice anything unusual. But over time, the conversations started changing. Subtly. She began asking questions. Questions that sounded innocent. Questions that weren't. How much was the house worth? Now, had I updated my insurance coverage? What would happen to the property someday? Did I still have all the renovation paperwork? Little questions. Tiny questions. The kind that don't seem important by themselves. But together they started forming a picture. One afternoon, she visited wearing a cream-colored sweater and carrying coffee from Thomas Hammer. We were standing in the kitchen. Maggie's kitchen. Lauren slowly looked around the room. Then she asked something that caught my attention. Have you ever thought about how much this kitchen would cost today? Not Mom loved this kitchen. Not I miss being here. Not remember when we baked Christmas cookies. No, she wanted a number. I gave her one. Roughly $30,000 to $35,000. Maybe more. She nodded. Just nodded, like she was mentally filing the information away. At the time, I ignored it. Looking back, I shouldn't have. You know that feeling when a memory suddenly changes, meaning years later? That's what happened, because that wasn't the last question. It was only the first. And as the months passed, Lauren's interest in my well-being seemed strangely connected to her interest in my assets. Not obvious. Not enough to accuse her of anything. Just enough to make me uncomfortable. Meanwhile, my best friend, Walt Harrison, noticed it too. Walt and I have known each other since Ronald Reagan was president. He's 68 years old, permanently sarcastic, and incapable of minding his own business. Which is exactly why I love him. One afternoon, he sat at my kitchen island drinking coffee. He glanced towards the driveway where Lauren had just left. Then he looked at me. Elliott. What? Your daughter asks more questions about your house than a tax assessor." I laughed, but Walt didn't. And for the first time, a small, uncomfortable feeling settled in the back of my mind. A feeling I couldn't quite explain. A feeling that would eventually change everything. Because the first strange question Lauren asked after Maggie died wasn't about me. It was about what I owned. The thing about trust is that it rarely disappears all at once. It fades, slowly, quietly, like daylight leaving a room. After Walt made that comment about Lauren sounding more like a tax assessor than a daughter, I laughed it off. Mostly because I wanted to. Nobody wants to believe their child might be looking at them differently, especially after losing a spouse. I was already adjusting to enough changes. I didn't need another one. For several months, life settled into a routine. Every Tuesday morning, I'd have breakfast at Frank's Diner on North Division Street. Every Thursday, Walt and I would meet for coffee at a little place near Riverfront Park. Every Sunday afternoon, Lauren usually called. Sometimes she drove over from Coeur d'Alene with Tyler. Sometimes she didn't. But one thing gradually became obvious. Lauren had become very interested in my future living arrangements. "Dad, that house is huge. Dad, those stairs worry me. Dad, what if you fall when nobody's there?" Reasonable concerns, at least on the surface. And honestly, she wasn't completely wrong. I was 66. The house was larger than I needed. The second floor rarely got used anymore. After Maggie died, entire rooms sat untouched for weeks. One rainy November afternoon, I slipped slightly while carrying laundry downstairs. I didn't fall. I caught myself immediately. But Lauren happened to be visiting. She saw it, and her reaction surprised me. Not because she was concerned, because she became determined, almost instantly. Within 24 hours, she had sent me links to senior-friendly condos. Within 48 hours, she had researched local real estate agents. Within 72 hours, she had created what appeared to be a complete relocation strategy. Stay with me here. Most children would make suggestions. Lauren was making plans. For me. Without me. The following Saturday, she arrived at the house carrying a yellow legal pad covered in notes. Actual notes, typed printouts, highlighted sections, color-coded tabs. You would have thought she was preparing for a corporate merger. "Dad, hear me out." Those 4 words should terrify every parent. Because "hear me out" usually means someone has already made a decision and simply needs your cooperation. She sat across from me at the kitchen island. Maggie's kitchen. My kitchen. The kitchen that would eventually become the center of this entire mess. Lauren spread papers across the countertop. "There's a condo available near Sacred Heart." I looked down. 2 bedrooms, ground floor, no stairs, built in 2018, monthly HOA fees that looked mildly criminal. Lauren continued, "You'd be closer to doctors." "I don't need doctors." "You will eventually." "That's a very encouraging thing to tell your father." She rolled her eyes. Tyler laughed awkwardly. That became a familiar pattern. Lauren pushed. Tyler smiled nervously. I changed the subject. For several weeks, the conversations continued. Not arguments, campaigns. Lauren was running a campaign. Eventually, I agreed to look at the condo. Not because I wanted to move. Because I was tired. Grief does strange things to decision-making. When you've spent years caring for someone you love, sometimes you stop fighting battles that don't feel urgent. The condo was nice enough. Clean, quiet, simple. Nothing wrong with it. Nothing right about it either. But I could see the appeal, especially for someone living alone. 3 months later, I signed the paperwork. Looking back, that's probably the moment this entire story truly began. The move itself happened in early spring, March, cold mornings, wet sidewalks, Gray skies hanging over Spokane. Lauren volunteered to coordinate everything. That should have been another warning sign. She organized movers. She organized storage. She organized schedules. She organized contractors. She organized things so efficiently that I barely had time to think. At the time, I interpreted that as kindness. Now I interpret it differently. One afternoon during the move, I noticed Lauren standing alone in the kitchen. She wasn't packing. She wasn't cleaning. She was studying the cabinets, running her hand across one of the doors, examining the finish, almost admiring it. The moment lasted only a few seconds. Then she noticed me watching. "Oh, I was just thinking about how beautiful these are." I smiled. "Maggie loved them." Lauren nodded, then changed the subject immediately. That bothered me. Not enough to confront her, just enough to remember it later. Memory is funny that way. Certain moments don't make sense until years afterward. About 2 weeks after I moved into the condo, Lauren called. "Dad, we should probably clear out the rest of the house." "What rest of the house?" "The storage areas, garage, basement, extra furniture." "No rush." "There kind of is." I frowned. "Why?" "Because empty houses attract problems." That sounded reasonable. Again, everything sounded reasonable. That's what made it dangerous. The next stage of the plan involved a storage company. Lauren said some items needed temporary storage until I decided what to keep. The company would inventory everything, handle transportation, protect valuable property. Simple, professional, efficient. I agreed, mostly because I trusted my daughter, and because I was still learning how to live without Maggie. Meanwhile, Walt had become increasingly suspicious. One afternoon he arrived carrying 2 coffees and enough skepticism for an entire jury. He sat down in my condo living room. "Something feels off." I sighed. "Here we go." "No, seriously." "Walt." "No, seriously." "You already said that." He ignored me. "When was the last time Lauren helped you with something that wasn't connected to the house?" I thought about it. Longer than I expected, and that bothered me. Walt noticed. His expression changed. "See, you're imagining things." "Am I?" "Yes." "Then why'd you have to think about it?" I hated when he did that. Because he was annoyingly good at it. The man spent 40 years as an electrician, and somehow developed the interrogation skills of a homicide detective. A week later, he decided to install a doorbell camera at the old house. Not because I asked, because Walt rarely waits for permission. The installation was a disaster. He spent 40 minutes climbing up and down a ladder, another 20 arguing with the instruction manual, then somehow mounted the camera facing a hydrangea bush, an entire hydrangea bush, nothing else, just leaves. Every motion alert became a documentary about plant life. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. Walt blamed technology. Technology blamed Walt. The hydrangea remained under surveillance. For the next 3 days, the most suspicious activity recorded at my house involved a squirrel. Those moments matter when I think back on everything, because despite what was coming, life wasn't all anger and betrayal. There were still ordinary days, still laughter, still friendship, still people who cared. Eventually, Lauren informed me that the remaining contents of the house had been sorted, stored, disposed of, or donated. Everything was handled. Everything was organized. Everything was under control. Again, those words, under control. A few days later, she called. "You're all set, Dad." "Good. One less thing for you to worry about." I thanked her. Honestly, I meant it. Because at that moment I still believed she was helping me. I still believed we were on the same side. I still believed the things being moved were boxes, Furniture, storage bins, old tools, old memories. I thought she was helping me move my belongings. I didn't realize she was moving pieces off the board. 3 weeks after Lauren assured me everything had been handled, I realized I had forgotten something. Not something valuable, not something expensive, something worse, an old photo album. One of Maggie's favorites. It contained pictures from family vacations, birthdays, Christmas mornings, and a collection of badly focused photographs she insisted were artistic. They weren't, but I loved them anyway. I had been looking through some boxes in the condo when I suddenly remembered the album was still in a cabinet above the coat closet at the old house. The kind of place people use for things they don't need often enough to remember. I glanced at the clock. 10:42 a.m. Tuesday. Nothing special. Just an ordinary day that was about to become very unusual. I grabbed my keys, climbed into the Ford Ranger, and drove across Spokane toward West 19th Avenue. The neighborhood looked exactly the same. The same maple trees, the same cracked sidewalks, the same retired couple walking their dog near the corner. For a moment I felt something close to comfort. Then I pulled into my driveway. The house looked empty, not abandoned, just lonely. You know that feeling. A place can look physically unchanged and still feel different. The front porch seemed smaller. The windows looked darker. The silence felt heavier. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The familiar scent was gone. No coffee, no cinnamon, no trace of Maggie's vanilla candles. Just dust and stillness. I stood in the entryway for a moment. Sometimes grief ambushes you when you least expect it. A doorway, a photograph, an empty chair. I took a breath and headed toward the hallway closet. The album was exactly where I remembered, which wasn't surprising. My memory has always been annoyingly precise, one of the side effects of my old profession. For nearly 30 years I worked as an insurance adjuster, specializing in residential property claims. People hear that and imagine paperwork. There was paperwork, a mountain of it. But there was also investigation, observation, documentation. You learned to notice things, tiny things, the angle of a crack, the age of water damage, the difference between accidental loss and deliberate deception. A house tells stories if you know how to listen. And for most of my career, listening paid the bills. I tucked the photo album under my arm and started walking toward the front door. Then something caught my attention. At first, I couldn't identify what felt wrong. Just a strange sensation, a missing note in a familiar song. I stopped, turned around, looked down the hallway toward the kitchen, and froze. The room looked wrong, not damaged, wrong, the kind of wrong your brain notices before your eyes do. I slowly walked forward, one step, then another, and suddenly I understood. The kitchen was gone. Not the room, the kitchen. The cabinets were missing. All of them. Every upper cabinet, every lower cabinet. The island, the trim, the decorative panels, the crown molding, gone. I stood there staring. For several seconds, my brain simply refused to process what I was seeing. Imagine walking into your bedroom and finding the bed gone. Not broken, not moved, gone. That's what it felt like. The walls were exposed. Screw holes remained visible. Dust outlines marked where the cabinets had once been mounted. The room looked stripped, surgically emptied. I slowly set the photo album on the counter. Actually, what remained of the counter, part of the stone surface, was still there. Part wasn't. The entire scene felt bizarre. I walked closer, touched the wall, examined the mounting points, studied the exposed sections. And that's when my professional instincts took over. Emotion stepped aside. Observation moved in. Stay with me here, because this next part matters. Most people would have called someone immediately. Most people would have started yelling. Most people would have assumed the cabinets had been removed and discarded. I didn't, because I knew what disposal looked like. And this wasn't it. The cabinets had been removed carefully. Very carefully. I crouched beside one section of wall. The screw holes were clean, no splintering, no rush demolition, no pry bar damage, no cracked mounting points. Whoever removed them had taken their time. I checked another section. Same result. Then another. Same result again. Interesting. Very interesting. I walked around the room slowly. The more I looked, the less I believed Lauren's future explanation, because by that point I already knew there would be an explanation. People always provide explanations, especially when they think they're smarter than you. I took photographs, dozens of them, wide shots, close-ups, wall markings, mounting points, measurements, pure habit, the same habits I'd used for decades. Eventually, I stepped outside and called Lauren. She answered on the third ring. "Hey, Dad." Her voice sounded cheerful, normal, relaxed. I looked back toward the empty kitchen. "Lauren?" "Yeah." "What happened to the cabinets?" Silence. Not long, maybe 2 seconds, but long enough. Then came the answer. "Oh, those. Not Mom's cabinets, not the kitchen, not the custom cabinetry. Those. The contractors removed them. I can see that." Another pause. "They weren't worth keeping." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. I knew exactly what those cabinets were worth, financially and emotionally. "Weren't worth keeping?" I asked. "There was some moisture damage." Now that got my attention, because it was a lie, a small lie, but definitely a lie. I would have known if there had been moisture damage. I had inspected that kitchen more times than I could count. There was none. Lauren continued speaking. The words came too quickly. Contractors, safety concerns, old materials, disposal costs, replacement value, a lot of talking. People often talk too much when they're nervous. Finally, she said something that stuck with me. The guys said nobody would want them anyway. Nobody would want them. Interesting choice of words. Not they threw them away. Not they were destroyed. Not they were unsalvageable. Nobody would want them. I thanked her, calmly, then ended the call, because I had already learned something important. Lauren wasn't angry. Lauren wasn't defensive. Lauren wasn't surprised, I noticed. She sounded prepared, like someone repeating a script. I spent another 20 minutes documenting everything. Then I called Walt. He answered immediately. "What's wrong? How'd you know something was wrong? Because you never call before noon unless someone died or someone lied." Fair point. Walt. "Yeah. The kitchen is gone." Silence. Then, "What do you mean gone?" "The cabinets. All of them. Every single one." Another silence. Then a long whistle. "That's not normal." "No. Not even a little. No." Walt arrived 30 minutes later. Together we walked through the empty room. He stared, then shook his head, then stared again. Finally, he said something simple, something that would stay with me for weeks. "Elliott." "What?" "Nobody throws away cabinets like this." "No. They moved them." "That's what I think, too." The room became quiet, the kind of quiet that arrives when two people reach the same conclusion simultaneously. I looked around one final time, at the empty walls, the exposed screw holes, the ghost outlines where Maggie's dream kitchen had once stood. And for the first time, I stopped asking where the cabinets went. Instead, I started asking a different question. Who was foolish enough to show them off? For the next 3 weeks, nothing happened. At least that's how it appeared. No dramatic discoveries, no confessions, No mysterious contractors showing up at my door. Just silence. And sometimes silence is the most frustrating part of all. Because once a question gets into your head, it wants an answer. The cabinets had gone somewhere. I knew that much. But where and why? More importantly, why would Lauren lie about them? I spent several days trying to convince myself there had to be some explanation I wasn't seeing. Maybe the contractor had taken them. Maybe somebody had purchased them. Maybe Lauren had repeated information she believed was true. I gave her every benefit of the doubt I could. Then I gave her a few she probably hadn't earned. Because that's what parents do, even when we shouldn't. One Thursday morning, Walt and I were sitting outside a coffee shop near Riverfront Park. It was one of those bright Spokane mornings where the sky looks freshly washed. Walt was eating a blueberry muffin, or more accurately, destroying a blueberry muffin. The man approaches baked goods with military aggression. I was halfway through my coffee when my phone buzzed. A text message from Walt, which was strange because Walt was sitting 6 feet away. I looked up. He nodded toward my phone. "Open it. You texted me while sitting next to me. Open it." "Walt." "Open it." I sighed and unlocked the screen. The message contained an Instagram link. Nothing else. No explanation, no comment. Just a link. "What is this?" "Open it." There are moments in life when you know something important is about to happen. Not because of logic, because of instinct. I tapped the link. The video loaded. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Bright music, fast cuts, expensive editing, the kind of social media content designed to make people feel impressed and slightly inadequate at the same time. Then I saw Lauren, standing in a kitchen, smiling, spinning toward the camera. The caption read, "Dream Kitchen Reveal Months of Planning Finally Paid Off," followed by several heart emojis. Several. Far too many. I watched the video once, then again, then a third time, and by the fourth viewing, I wasn't breathing normally anymore, because I knew exactly what I was looking at. Stay with me here. Most people think they can recognize objects because they remember the general appearance. That's not how professionals identify things. That's not how I spent 30 years working. We identify details, specific details, tiny details, the things nobody bothers to fake. The kitchen in Lauren's video wasn't similar to mine. It wasn't inspired by mine. It wasn't based on mine. It was mine. The first thing I recognized was the cabinet beside the sink, specifically the lower left corner. Back in 2018, my grandson had dropped a metal toy truck against that cabinet door. The impact left a small crescent-shaped scratch. Not deep, not obvious, but permanent. Most people would never notice it. I noticed it immediately. There it was, exactly where it had always been. I paused the video, zoomed in. Still there. My pulse accelerated. Then I noticed the brass handles. Now plenty of kitchens use brass handles. That alone meant nothing. But Maggie had selected a very specific design. Slightly curved, hand-brushed finish. A tiny manufacturing flaw near the base of 3 handles in the entire set. One of those handles appeared in the video. The flaw appeared too. I paused again, zoomed further. My stomach tightened. "Walt, what? Come look at this." He leaned over, studied the screen, then looked at me, then back at the screen, then at me again. "Oh." That was all he said. Just, "Oh." The kind of "oh" people use when they suddenly understand something terrible. I continued watching, frame by frame, minute by minute, detail by detail. The island, the trim, the crown molding, the grain patterns, the corner joints, everything matched, every single thing. You know that look detectives have in movies when the final piece clicks into place? I always thought that expression was exaggerated. Turns out it isn't. Because that's exactly how it felt. Not excitement. Certainty. The awful certainty of being right. Lauren had my cabinets. Not similar cabinets. Not replacement cabinets. My cabinets. Inside her house. Approximately 30 miles away in Coeur d'Alene. And she was proudly broadcasting them to the internet. The irony almost made me laugh. After all the effort required to move them. After all the planning. After all the deception. She couldn't wait to show them off. Greed has a funny relationship with patience. People who get away with something often become desperate to enjoy the reward. That desperation creates mistakes. Big mistakes. I watched the video a 5th time, then a 6th. This time I paid attention to everything. The posting date, the captions, the comments, the hashtags, the timestamps. Every detail mattered. Lauren's account wasn't private. Neither were the comments. Hundreds of them. Friends congratulating her. Neighbors praising the renovation. People asking for contractor recommendations. Questions about materials. Questions about costs. Questions about design choices. Then I found a comment that caught my attention. Someone had written, "Love those cabinets. Where did you find them?" Lauren replied, "Custom renovation project. Totally worth the effort." I stared at the screen. Custom renovation project. Interesting wording. Technically true. The best lies often contain pieces of truth. The cabinets were custom. There had been effort. Just not hers. I started taking screenshots. Dozens of them. Then more. Photos, comments, dates, captions. Every version of the video, every angle, every frame that showed a recognizable detail. Old habits, insurance habits, documentation habits. The same habits that had paid my mortgage for decades. Walt watched quietly. Eventually he spoke. "You believe it?" "I don't believe it." "What do you mean?" I paused the video, pointed at the screen. "Belief is when you're not sure." Then I tapped the cabinet image. "This is evidence." Walt nodded slowly. "Fair enough." The next few days became an exercise in restraint. I didn't call Lauren. I didn't confront her. I didn't post anything online. I didn't tell relatives. I didn't make accusations. Instead, I collected information. Because emotion solves very few problems. Evidence solves many. Every evening I reviewed the video. Every evening I noticed something new. A reflection, a cabinet angle, a familiar panel, a section of trim. The more I studied it, the stronger the case became. And here's the strange part. I wasn't angry yet. Not really. Hurt absolutely. Confused very. Disappointed more than I can describe. But anger requires certainty about motives. At that point, I still didn't fully understand why Lauren had done it. I only knew that she had. Late one evening, I sat alone in my condo. The television was off. The room was quiet. The glow from my laptop illuminated the kitchen table. I watched the renovation video again. One final time. And suddenly something occurred to me. Lauren believed she was sharing a success story, a victory, something to celebrate. But she wasn't. Without realizing it, she had created a permanent record, a digital confession, a collection of evidence accessible to anyone with an internet connection. She thought she had posted a celebration. What she had actually posted was evidence. The following Saturday, I opened a storage box I hadn't touched in nearly 2 years. Then another, then another. By the end of the afternoon, my condo living room looked like a paperwork explosion had occurred. Folders, binders, photo envelopes, receipts, old insurance documents, home improvement records, the kind of paperwork most people throw away, the kind of paperwork Maggie never threw away. And thank God she didn't. You see, Maggie had two qualities that made life both wonderful and, occasionally, exhausting. She was organized, and she was more organized than me. Which should tell you something because I spent 3 decades documenting insurance claims. If I kept records, Maggie built archives, color-coded archives, labeled archives, indexed archives. There were moments during our marriage when I suspected she could locate a missing document faster than the FBI. One of those moments was about to save me. I sat cross-legged on the floor and began working through the boxes. Outside, Spokane was enjoying one of those warm spring afternoons that makes everyone suddenly remember why they live in the Pacific Northwest. Inside, I was digging through 20 years of paperwork. Not exactly the same experience. About an hour into the search, I found a white binder, 3 inches thick. A label on the spine read, "Kitchen Project 2016 inches." Of course it did. I actually laughed. Because only Maggie would create an entire binder dedicated to a kitchen renovation. Then I opened it, and everything changed. The first section contained invoices, every invoice, cabinet fabrication, hardware purchases, countertop installation, delivery fees, labor costs, paint specifications, everything. The second section contained photographs, hundreds of photographs, before construction, during construction, after construction, close-up images, wide-angle images, measurements, material samples, progress updates. If someone wanted to rebuild that kitchen from scratch, this binder could probably guide them through the process. I kept turning pages. Then I found something that made me stop. A handwritten note in Maggie's neat cursive. Elliott's identification system. I blinked, then smiled, because I had forgotten all about that. Stay with me here. This next part matters more than anything else in the story. Years before I retired, I handled a large insurance claim involving custom cabinetry that had been stolen during a home renovation project. The homeowner spent months trying to prove ownership. The process became a nightmare. Serial numbers were missing, records were incomplete, documentation was weak. Eventually, everything worked out. But the experience taught me something. If you own custom property, prove ownership before you need to, not after. So when Maggie and I ordered our cabinets in 2016, I created a simple identification system. Nothing complicated, nothing visible, just practical. Each cabinet received a unique identification code, small, discreet, hidden. The codes were recorded in project documents, photographed, and stored with insurance records. At the time, it seemed like professional overkill, one of many habits developed during a long career. Now it looked like foresight. I continued searching through the binder. A few pages later, I found exactly what I hoped to find. Cabinet identification records, photographs, location diagrams, reference notes, everything. Cabinet A1, Cabinet A2, Cabinet B4, Cabinet C7, each one documented, each one photographed, each one tied directly to the kitchen Lauren now claimed was part of her renovation project. I sat back in my chair. For the first time since discovering the Instagram video, I felt something close to confidence. Not certainty, confidence. There is a difference. Certainty is emotional. Confidence comes from evidence, and evidence was beginning to pile up. A few minutes later, I found another document. Then another. Then another. The file kept growing stronger. Original contracts, manufacturing specifications, custom dimensions, unique wood grain descriptions, installation diagrams. The more I reviewed, the more impossible Lauren's story became. By late afternoon, I had assembled a stack nearly 4 inches high. And then I discovered the best piece yet. The original correspondence from the cabinet workshop. I stared at the company logo. Whitman Custom Woodworks, Yakima, Washington, still in business. At least I hoped so. I grabbed my laptop and searched online. They were still operating. Same company, same location, same family ownership. Interesting. Very interesting. Monday morning I called. A woman answered. Whitman Custom Woodworks. I introduced myself, then explained the situation. There was a brief pause. Not suspicious, more surprised. Then she spoke. Elliott Jenkins. Yes. Another pause. Then, your wife's name was Margaret Wright. That caught me off guard. Yes. The woman laughed softly. My goodness. You remember us. I remember your wife. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then she continued. My father owned the company back then. I'm Carol Whitman. I remembered the name immediately. She had worked in the office during our renovation project, back when Maggie was selecting finishes and asking approximately 1,000 questions. Carol laughed when I mentioned that. That sounds about right. Then she said something that hit me harder than I expected. We loved your wife. I swallowed, because some grief never leaves. It just changes shape, Carol continued. After the installation was finished, she mailed my father homemade chocolate chip cookies. I smiled despite myself. That sounded exactly like Maggie. She also sent a thank you card. That sounds exactly like her. We still have it. That caught me completely off guard. What? The card. My father kept it. For several seconds I couldn't speak, because suddenly this conversation wasn't about cabinets anymore. It was about Maggie, the way good people leave fingerprints on the world, the way kindness survives longer than we expect. Eventually I explained why I had called, the missing cabinets, the Instagram video, the documentation, everything. Carol listened carefully. When I finished, she became very quiet. Then she asked one question. Do you still have your project number? I looked through the binder, found it, read it aloud. She typed something. A few seconds passed. Then she spoke, and her words felt like another brick being added to a wall of evidence. Elliott, that kitchen was a custom one-of-one project. What does that mean? It means there was never another cabinet set built exactly like yours. I sat upright. You're sure? Absolutely, she continued. The dimensions were custom. The finish combination was custom. The hardware package was custom. The crown molding specifications were custom. Then she added, if those cabinets are sitting in somebody else's house, they're your cabinets. Exactly what I already believed. But hearing it from an independent source mattered a lot. Carol agreed to search company archives. Within 2 days, she emailed copies of original records, manufacturing notes, order sheets, material specifications, documents that tied those cabinets directly to my property. More evidence, more confirmation, more problems for Lauren. That evening, Walt came over carrying takeout from Dick's Hamburgers. When you're dealing with family betrayal, apparently hamburgers are considered emotional support equipment. He dropped the bag on the table. So, I showed him everything. The binder, the photos, the records, Carol's email, the identification system, all of it. Walt slowly reviewed the documents, then looked up. Elliott. What? You don't have a suspicion anymore. No. You have a case. For the first time, I realized he was right. Weeks earlier, I had been searching for answers. Now I was organizing proof. The difference was enormous, because questions create uncertainty. Evidence creates options. And by Friday afternoon, I wasn't looking for proof anymore. I was organizing it. The following Monday at exactly 8:35 a.m., I parked my Ford Ranger outside a brick office building on Riverside Avenue in downtown Spokane. The building wasn't impressive. No marble floors, no giant glass lobby, no expensive artwork hanging on the walls. Just a practical 3-story office building occupied by accountants, insurance brokers, and attorneys, which in my experience is exactly where the dangerous professionals usually work. The lawyers who make television commercials rarely worry me. The quiet ones do. I walked into Sullivan Legal Group carrying 2 binders and enough documentation to qualify as a small archive. The receptionist looked at the stack, then looked at me, then looked back at the stack. "You moving in?" I laughed. "No, family problem." Her expression changed immediately. Apparently she understood those 2 words. Everybody does. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from Rebecca Sullivan, 34 years old, dark blazer, sharp eyes, coffee cup sitting beside an open legal pad. The first thing I noticed was a faint coffee stain near the bottom corner of one document on her desk. Not because it mattered, because old habits never die. Rebecca noticed me looking. "You're either very observant or very distracted." "Former insurance adjuster." She nodded. "That explains it." Then she pointed toward the binders. "Let's see what you've got." For the next hour, I told the story. Everything. Maggie's kitchen, the move, the missing cabinets, the Instagram video, the identification records, Carol Whitman's documentation, the photographs, the conversations with Lauren, every detail. Rebecca listened without interrupting. Occasionally she wrote notes. Occasionally she asked questions. Mostly she listened. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. Then she stared at the ceiling for several seconds. Finally she looked at me. "Well?" "Well, you weren't kidding." "About what?" "The documentation." I smiled slightly. Maggie would have been disappointed if I showed up unprepared. Rebecca laughed. Then she opened one of the binders again, slowly turning pages, studying evidence, reviewing timelines, examining photographs. The room remained quiet for several minutes. Then she asked a question. "What outcome do you want?" Simple question. Complicated answer. I looked out the window. Traffic moved along Riverside Avenue below. People walking, people working, people living normal lives. Meanwhile, I was sitting in a lawyer's office discussing legal action against my daughter. Life gets strange sometimes. "I don't know." Rebecca nodded. That answer apparently wasn't unusual. "Okay. I don't want to destroy her." "Good. I don't want revenge." "Good." I hesitated, then corrected myself. "Actually, that's not entirely true." Rebecca smiled. "Honest answer. I don't want revenge that ruins her life." "That's different." "Yes." She tapped her pen against the desk. Then she said something important. "Elliott courts aren't great at repairing relationships." "No. They're much better at resolving facts." That stayed with me. Because she was right. The legal system couldn't give me my daughter back. It couldn't fix trust. It couldn't repair grief. It couldn't explain why Lauren had done what she'd done. But it could establish the truth. And at that moment, the truth mattered. A lot. Rebecca spent the next 40 minutes explaining legal options, property conversion, civil theft, misappropriation of assets, potential elder exploitation claims, insurance implications, contractor liability, storage company liability. The list was longer than I expected. Apparently stealing custom cabinetry creates more legal problems than most people realize. Good to know. Not information I ever expected to need. Rebecca eventually closed the binder, then folded her hands. "Elliott." "Yeah. If everything you've shown me is accurate, your daughter has a serious problem." The words landed heavily. Not because I didn't believe them, Because I did, and hearing someone else confirm it made everything feel real. I sat quietly. Rebecca continued. The contractor may also have a problem. I figured. The storage company might have a problem. Okay. And depending on how everything was represented, there may be additional issues we haven't identified yet. Wonderful. Family betrayal apparently comes with bonus complications. Rebecca noticed my expression. That's not necessarily bad news. Feels like bad news. It means there are multiple people motivated to cooperate. That was an interesting point. Very interesting. Then she asked another question. Has Lauren contacted you about the cabinet since you discovered the video? No. Have you confronted her? No. Rebecca nodded approvingly. Good. Walt says the same thing. Who's Walt? My best friend. Smart man. I laughed. Walt would have enjoyed hearing that. The meeting continued for another hour. By the end, Rebecca had developed a strategy. Not a lawsuit. Not yet. Something quieter, more patient, more effective. Pay attention to this next part. Because this became one of the most important decisions in the entire story. Rebecca didn't want to attack. She wanted to preserve evidence, records, communications, documentation, digital files, construction records, invoices, social media content, everything. People make mistakes when they think nobody is watching. People become careful when they know lawyers are involved. So the goal wasn't confrontation. The goal was information. That afternoon, Rebecca prepared preservation letters, formal legal notices, professional, polite, extremely difficult to ignore. One went to the contractor, one went to the storage company. Both instructed recipients to preserve records related to the removal, transportation, storage, installation, and handling of property connected to my address. No accusations, no threats, just notice, official notice, the legal equivalent of turning on a spotlight. A few days later, we received our first reaction. The contractor called Rebecca's office. Not Lauren, not Tyler, the contractor. Interesting. Very interesting. Apparently, legal letters have a way of getting people's attention. Rebecca wouldn't tell me everything from the conversation. Attorney strategy, attorney privilege, attorney mysteries. But she did tell me one thing. He sounded nervous. That was enough. Meanwhile, Lauren continued posting online. Vacation photos, restaurant photos, kitchen photos, lots of kitchen photos. Every new post strengthened the evidence file. Every comment created additional documentation. Every public statement increased potential exposure. And she seemed completely unaware. That's the strange thing about arrogance. It often creates its own blind spots. Lauren had spent her entire life assuming she was the smartest person in the room. Usually she was smart, very smart. But smart people sometimes become careless because they're accustomed to being right. Weeks passed. I remained silent. No accusations, no confrontations, no dramatic family meetings. Nothing. The hardest part wasn't gathering evidence. The hardest part was pretending everything was normal. Lauren called occasionally. I answered. We discussed weather, traffic, grandkids, normal things. The cabinets never came up, not once. And every conversation felt strange, because she knew something. I knew something. Neither of us acknowledged it. Like two poker players staring across a table, waiting, watching, calculating. One evening, Walt stopped by with pizza. Halfway through dinner, he looked at me and asked, "How are you doing?" Not strategically, not legally, personally. The question caught me off guard. I thought for a moment, then answered honestly. Hurt, Walt nodded. Yeah, more than angry, yeah. I keep thinking about Maggie. His expression softened. Of course you do, because that was the real wound. Not the money, not the cabinets, Not the legal case, the memory, the disrespect, the feeling that something Maggie loved had been treated like inventory. And that's when I finally understood what I was fighting for. Not cabinets, not compensation, not even justice. Truth, simple truth. And once I understood that, patience became easier. Because I wasn't building a lawsuit anymore. I was building a timeline that would eventually become impossible for Lauren to escape. The hardest thing wasn't gathering evidence. It was staying quiet. There is an old saying that I've found to be true more often than people realize. Most lies don't fail because someone discovers them. Most lies fail because the liar eventually becomes comfortable. Comfort creates carelessness. Carelessness creates evidence. And evidence has a way of surviving long after confidence disappears. For nearly a month after Rebecca sent the preservation letters, Lauren remained unusually quiet. Not silent, just careful. Her social media activity slowed down. The kitchen posts became less frequent. The renovation updates nearly disappeared. Rebecca noticed it too. Somebody warned her. I agreed. The timing was too obvious. Either the contractor had spoken to her or someone else had. Regardless, she knew something had changed. The problem for Lauren was that she only knew part of the story. She knew lawyers were involved. She didn't know how much evidence already existed, and she definitely didn't know about the cabinet identification system. That secret remained safely hidden. For the moment. One Tuesday afternoon in early summer, I was sitting on my balcony drinking iced tea when Walt called. Not texted, called. That immediately got my attention. Walt only called when something was broken, on fire, or interesting. Sometimes all three. What's going on? Elliott. What? Get your laptop. I sighed. Walt. Get your laptop. That tone usually meant entertainment was coming. Or disaster. Occasionally both. 5 minutes later, I was sitting at my kitchen table, laptop open, phone pressed against my ear. What am I looking for? Lauren's account. I pulled it up. Nothing looked unusual. Vacation photos, family photos, a picture of some expensive-looking seafood dinner. Then I saw a new video, posted 37 minutes earlier. Title, A Budget Breakdown, How We Created Our Dream Kitchen Without Overspending. I closed my eyes, then opened them again. Sometimes people make your job too easy. Please tell me she didn't. Oh, she did. I clicked play. Lauren appeared on screen wearing a white blouse and smiling confidently. The kitchen filled the background. My kitchen. Still my kitchen. The same cabinets, the same island, the same hardware, the same evidence. She began explaining the renovation process. Costs, materials, contractors, planning decisions, standard influencer content. Then she made her first mistake, a significant one. According to Lauren, the cabinets had come from an estate sale in Spokane. Purchased for $4,800 cash. She sounded very proud of herself, like she'd discovered hidden treasure. I paused the video, then replayed that section. Twice. 3 times, 4 times. Same statement every time. Interesting, because the story had changed. Previously, the cabinets were supposedly damaged, disposed of, not worth keeping. Now they were estate sale purchases. Different explanation, different timeline, different facts. Liars often forget one important rule. You have to remember what you've already said. I immediately sent the clip to Rebecca. Her response arrived 7 minutes later. Save multiple copies? Simple, direct, very Rebecca. Then Lauren continued talking. And things got even better. She proudly tagged the renovation company. Northridge Renovations. Specifically tagged them, directly, publicly, for everyone to see. That caught my attention. Not because the contractor mattered, because desperate people sometimes create distance. Confident people create connections. Lauren wasn't distancing herself from the project. She was advertising it, which suggested she still believed everything was safe, still believed she was untouchable, still believed nobody could prove anything. That confidence lasted approximately 4 more minutes, because then she made the mistake that changed everything. Pay attention to this next part. This was the moment the entire case transformed. Halfway through the video, Lauren opened one of the upper cabinets. Not intentionally, not dramatically, just naturally. The camera followed her movement. The door swung open. The inside became visible. For less than 2 seconds, maybe 1.5. Then the door closed. Most viewers never noticed anything. I nearly fell out of my chair. Walt, what? Pause it? I already did. Of course he had. I rewound, paused, zoomed, rewound again, paused again. There, inside the cabinet, barely visible. A small identification sticker. Tiny. Almost impossible to notice. Almost. My pulse started climbing because I recognized it immediately. One of my original cabinet identification labels. The same labels documented in Maggie's binder. The same labels tied to insurance records. The same labels Lauren didn't know existed. I enlarged the image. The quality wasn't perfect, but it was good enough. Good enough to identify the cabinet location. Good enough to verify authenticity. Good enough to make me smile for the first time in weeks. Then I noticed something else. Something even better. A handwritten notation. Tiny. Faded, but visible. I stared at the screen, then laughed. Actually, laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was beautiful. Back in 2016, during installation, I had written location notes inside several cabinet frames. Simple reference marks. Nothing important at the time. Just practical installation information. One of them remained visible. The note read, L sink left, short for left of sink. Exactly where that cabinet had originally been installed in my house. Exactly where the project documentation placed it. Exactly where Maggie's records said it belonged. I immediately called Rebecca. She answered on the second ring. What happened? I explained. Then emailed screenshots. Several minutes passed. Finally she spoke. Well, your daughter just did something very unhelpful. I smiled. That's one way to put it. Rebecca laughed. Not often. But when she did, it usually meant somebody had made a very expensive mistake. This is excellent evidence. How excellent? Exceptionally excellent. That's legal terminology. At least I think it was. Meanwhile, Lauren remained blissfully unaware. The video continued accumulating views, comments, likes, shares, attention, exactly what she wanted. The problem was that attention cuts both ways. The more people watched, the more permanent the evidence became. The internet has a remarkable memory, especially when lawyers start preserving screenshots. A few days later, another interesting development occurred. Tyler called me. That alone was unusual. Tyler and I got along fine, but we rarely spoke without Lauren involved. I answered. Hey, Tyler. His voice sounded strained. Tough week. A pause, then. Something like that. Interesting, very interesting. We exchanged small talk. Weather, fishing, the grandkids, normal topics. Then he asked a strange question. Have you talked to Lauren much lately? There it was, the question behind the conversation. No more than usual. Another pause, longer this time. Then, okay, that was all. No explanation, no follow-up, nothing. But I heard something in his voice. Fear, not panic, not guilt. Fear. The kind of fear people experience when they realize a problem is bigger than they thought. After we hung up, I sat quietly for several minutes, thinking. Tyler wasn't the mastermind. Never had been. Lauren drove decisions. Tyler followed them. That dynamic had existed for years. But followers eventually become nervous when leaders start making mistakes. And Lauren was making mistakes. Lots of them. Public mistakes. Documented mistakes. Searchable mistakes. Permanent mistakes. By the end of the month, Rebecca's evidence file had doubled in size, maybe tripled. Every social media post seemed to create another piece, another inconsistency, another contradiction, another problem. The truly remarkable part, Lauren still had no idea. She believed she was managing a narrative. In reality, she was building a case against herself. One post at a time, one video at a time, one careless decision at a time, and all because she wanted people to admire something she hadn't earned. Greed had gotten her into trouble. Pride was keeping her there. And somewhere inside one of those cabinets sat a tiny sticker smaller than a postage stamp. A sticker Lauren never noticed. A sticker Tyler never noticed. A sticker nobody would have cared about, except that it was about to become louder than any courtroom bell. About 6 weeks after Lauren posted the video with the cabinet sticker, Rebecca called me on a Wednesday afternoon. I was reorganizing tools in my garage. Not because they needed organizing, because when you're waiting for something important, busy hands help. My phone rang. Rebecca. I answered immediately. Please tell me somebody finally did something stupid. There was a brief pause. Then Rebecca laughed. Elliott, I genuinely enjoy how often that's your opening line now. Was I right? Very. I set down a wrench. What happened? Your daughter's house just hit the market. I froze. For a second I thought I had misunderstood. The house. She's selling it. She's trying to. That changed everything. Immediately. Because up until that moment, Lauren's actions had been reckless. Selling the property would make them consequential. A public real estate listing creates records, representations, disclosures, valuations, marketing materials. People start making official statements. And official statements matter, especially when those statements involve stolen property. Rebecca continued. The kitchen is the centerpiece of the listing. Of course it was. The irony almost hurt. The very thing that would eventually expose her was now being used to increase the home's value. How much are they asking? $749,000. I let out a low whistle. Not because the price was impossible. Coeur d'Alene real estate had become expensive. But because I understood exactly what was happening. Lauren wanted the equity, the profit, the upgrade, the next step. And she wanted it quickly. Greed has a schedule, patience doesn't. I thanked Rebecca and ended the call. Then I sat quietly in the garage, thinking. For months I had been reacting, documenting, observing, preparing. Now the situation was moving towards something unavoidable, a conclusion, or at least the beginning of one. That evening, Walt came over carrying 2 cheeseburgers and an opinion. As usual. I told him about the listing. He listened carefully. Then he sat back in his chair. Well, the universe appears to be cooperating. I laughed. That's one way to describe it. The other way is that Lauren can't stop digging. Also true. Walt took a bite of his burger, then pointed at me. You're thinking. I am. Don't. What? Every time you get that look, something complicated happens. I don't have a look. You absolutely have a look. According to Walt, I have several looks. The skeptical look, the insurance adjuster look, the somebody is lying look, the this is going to end badly for someone look. Apparently I was wearing the last one. The next morning, Rebecca emailed the listing information, professional photographs, property details, marketing descriptions, virtual tour links, everything. I spent nearly an hour reviewing it. The kitchen appeared in almost every image, front and center, highlighted, celebrated, advertised. One sentence in particular caught my attention. Completely custom renovated kitchen featuring premium handcrafted cabinetry. I stared at the words, then read them again. Premium handcrafted cabinetry. Accurate, just not in the way Lauren intended. A little later that afternoon, Rebecca called again. I found something else. Good something or bad something. Good. I relaxed. There will be an open house. Interesting. Very interesting. When? Sunday. I looked at the calendar. 4 days away. Not much time. Not that we needed much. The evidence already existed. The question was how to use it. And more importantly, when. Stay with me here. Because this became one of the most important strategic decisions of the entire story. I could have confronted Lauren privately. I could have called her immediately. I could have sent copies of the evidence. I could have threatened legal action. A lot of people would have. But Rebecca advised patience. Again. Why? I asked. Because right now, she's still making representations. Meaning every statement becomes evidence. That made sense. A frustrating amount of sense. So we waited. Friday arrived. Then Saturday. And with each passing day I felt strangely calm. Not because I wasn't nervous, because I was. Very nervous. But once you've spent months gathering facts, there comes a point where the uncertainty disappears. The outcome remains unknown. The truth does not. Saturday afternoon, Walt insisted we go to Frank's diner. Apparently, emotional crises require pie. At least according to Walt. The man believes pie can solve nearly anything. Heartbreak, stress, politics, potential litigation. All roads apparently lead to pie. We sat in our usual booth, red vinyl seats, coffee refills that never seemed to end. The same waitress who had been serving us for years. Her name was Debbie. She already knew our orders, a dangerous level of familiarity. When the pie arrived, Walt studied me across the table. You ready? I thought about it, then nodded. Yeah. You nervous? Absolutely. Good. What does that mean? It means you're still human. Fair point. For a while we talked about other things, fishing, baseball, old memories, the kind of conversations friends have when they know something important is coming. Eventually, Walt pointed his fork toward me. What are you wearing tomorrow? I stared at him. What? To the open house. I'm not attending a wedding. Still, it's an open house. Exactly. I shook my head. I'm wearing jeans. 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 You're confronting your daughter with enough evidence to sink a battleship. I'm not confronting anybody. Walt laughed. Sure. I'm presenting facts. With jeans, facts don't care about wardrobe choices. That nearly caused him to choke on pie. The truth is, I wasn't interested in appearances anymore. For months, Lauren had focused on appearances. The perfect kitchen, the perfect posts, the perfect image. I had no interest in competing. Truth doesn't need marketing. It just needs patience. That night I barely slept. Not because I feared what might happen, because I kept thinking about Maggie, the kitchen, the house, the years, the memories attached to every cabinet door, every drawer, every small detail. People sometimes assume betrayal is primarily about anger. It isn't. Most of the time, it's about grief. You're mourning something that existed before someone chose to damage it. A relationship, a trust, a belief. That's what kept me awake. Not revenge, loss. Sunday morning arrived bright and clear. The weather was almost annoyingly beautiful. Blue skies, warm sunlight, perfect conditions for an open house. At noon, Rebecca called. Everything was ready. Documentation organized, copies prepared, evidence secured. No surprises, no improvisation, just facts. By 1:15 p.m. I was dressed. Blue jeans, brown boots, gray flannel shirt. Exactly what I told Walt I would wear. At 1:20, he arrived at my condo, took one look at me, then shook his head. "You actually wore the flannel." "Told you. You're unbelievable." "Thank you." That wasn't a compliment. We climbed into separate vehicles, Walt following behind me. The drive from Spokane to Coeur d'Alene felt shorter than usual, probably because my mind was elsewhere. Every mile carried me closer to a moment that had been building for months. A moment neither Lauren nor Tyler expected. A moment Maggie never would have wanted. But perhaps one that had become necessary. As I crossed into Idaho, I felt surprisingly calm again. Not happy, not excited, just certain. Certain of the facts, certain of the evidence, certain of what had happened. The rest would take care of itself. At exactly 1:47 p.m., I parked my old Ford Ranger 2 houses down from my daughter's perfect lie. At exactly 1:58 p.m., I walked through the front door of Lauren's house, not my daughter's house, not in that moment. In that moment, it was a crime scene with granite countertops. I know that sounds dramatic. Maybe it is. But stay with me here. When you've spent months collecting evidence, reviewing timelines, preserving records, and documenting facts, eventually there comes a day when all of those separate pieces finally stand in the same room together. This was that day. The open house was already busy. A young couple stood near the living room discussing schools. An older man was examining the backyard through a sliding glass door. A real estate agent moved smoothly through the crowd with the confidence of someone expecting a successful afternoon. And right in the center of everything stood Lauren, smiling, greeting visitors, selling a dream. For a few seconds she didn't notice me. Then she did. I watched the exact moment happen. Her eyes found mine. The smile froze. Not disappeared. Froze. Like a computer trying to process an impossible command. Behind her, Tyler turned around. His face immediately lost color. Not all of it. Just enough. Enough for me to know he understood exactly why I was there. I smiled politely. Not because I was happy. Because calm people make nervous people talk. Rebecca entered a few seconds later. She carried a slim leather portfolio. No drama, no announcements, just quiet preparation. Walt arrived behind us, looking entirely too pleased with himself. The man had been waiting months for this. Lauren recovered first. She always did. "Dad?" "Lauren?" Her voice sounded careful. "What are you doing here?" I glanced around. "Open house." The answer irritated her immediately. I could see it. Because technically I wasn't wrong. One of the advantages of telling the truth is that it requires very little creativity. Lauren folded her arms. "I didn't know you were coming." "No invitation required." The real estate agent approached. Professional smile, professional posture, professional confusion. "Is everything okay?" I nodded. "Absolutely." Lauren nodded too, much less convincingly. The agent looked between us, then wisely decided to help someone else. Smart woman. For the next 10 minutes I walked through the house. Slowly, calmly, observing. The kitchen remained the centerpiece. Every tour ended there. Every conversation returned there. Every compliment focused there. The handcrafted cabinetry, the beautiful finish, the custom design, the premium details. People loved it, and every compliment landed like a hammer, because I knew who had originally paid for it. At 2:17 p.m., the moment finally arrived. A prospective buyer stood near the island discussing renovation costs with Lauren. The real estate agent listened. Tyler stood nearby. 2 other visitors remained in the room. Perfect. Not crowded, not empty, just enough witnesses. I walked toward the island. Lauren noticed immediately. Her shoulders tightened. I stopped beside her, then asked a simple question. "Beautiful cabinets." She stared at me. "Thank you. Where did you get them?" Silence. Not long, but noticeable. Then she smiled. The social media smile. The practiced one. The estate sale. There it was. The story. Again, the same story she'd told online. The same story preserved in screenshots. The same story she had committed herself to publicly. I nodded thoughtfully. The Spokane estate sale. That's right. Interesting. Lauren's expression hardened. What does that mean? I looked around the room, then back at her. It means I'd love to see something. Nobody spoke. The room became strangely quiet. One of the buyers glanced toward us. Tyler looked like he wanted to disappear into the flooring. Lauren forced another smile. What exactly do you want to see? I pointed toward a cabinet, the one beside the sink. That one. The smile vanished. Not completely. Just enough. What about it? I'd like to open it. Now the room was paying attention. Not because anyone understood what was happening, because humans recognize tension instinctively. Lauren laughed. Too quickly. Too loudly. Why? Good question. I answered honestly. Because I think it belongs to me. Silence. Complete silence. The buyer near the island lowered his brochure. The real estate agent stopped moving. Tyler closed his eyes. Actually closed his eyes. Like a man bracing for impact. Lauren stared at me. Then laughed again. This time it sounded forced. That's ridiculous. Maybe. I opened the cabinet door. Nobody stopped me. Nobody could. And there it was. The sticker. Still attached, still visible, still exactly where it had been weeks earlier. I stepped aside. See that? Nobody answered. The buyer leaned closer. The real estate agent stepped forward. Tyler looked sick. Lauren looked furious. I reached into my folder, pulled out a photograph, then another, carefully, deliberately, one by one. No speeches, no theatrics, just evidence. This photograph was taken in my home in 2017. I handed it to the agent. The cabinet identification label is visible here. Another document. Original installation records. Another. Custom manufacturing documents. Another. Insurance documentation. Another. Cabinet location diagram. The room remained completely silent. People often imagine dramatic confrontations involve shouting. The reality is usually quieter. Truth has weight. When enough of it enters a room, people stop talking. The real estate agent studied the documents, then looked at the cabinet, then looked back at the documents. The color drained from her face. Slowly, like water leaving a sink. Lauren finally snapped. This is insane. I looked at her, calmly. No, this is harassment. No, you're embarrassing me. That part was true. I didn't deny it. Then Rebecca stepped forward. First time she'd spoken all afternoon. She handed the agent a business card, then spoke quietly. We represent Mr. Jenkins. The room got even quieter, if that was somehow possible. Lauren turned toward Tyler, looking for support, looking for reinforcement, looking for anything. Tyler looked down at the floor. Didn't say a word. That hurt her more than anything I had done. Then something unexpected happened. Jake Mercer walked into the kitchen. The contractor, Northridge Renovations. Apparently he'd stopped by the open house. Bad timing. For him. He saw me, saw Rebecca, saw the documents, saw the expressions on everyone's faces, and immediately understood. The man looked like he had accidentally walked into a tornado. Nobody said anything. Not at first. Then Jake asked the worst possible question. What happened? Rebecca looked at him, then at the cabinet, then back at him. I think you already know. Jake didn't answer, because he couldn't. The evidence sat 3 feet away, attached to the cabinet, waiting. Lauren's breathing had become visibly heavier, faster, angrier, desperate. And that's when she made the mistake. The fatal one. The mistake greed always creates, eventually. She stopped defending her actions, and started defending her reasoning. She pointed toward me. You weren't even using them anymore. The words landed like a gunshot. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody needed to. Because with one sentence, Lauren had abandoned every previous explanation. No estate sale, no disposal, no contractor mistake, no confusion, no misunderstanding. Gone. Replaced by something far more revealing. You weren't even using them anymore. Translation. She knew exactly where they came from. Exactly. The realization moved across the room almost visibly. The agent understood. The buyers understood. Tyler understood. Jake understood. Lauren understood too, about 3 seconds after she said it. But by then it was too late. Some statements can't be recalled. Some truths escape before people realize they're speaking them. I looked at my daughter, not angrily, not triumphantly, just sadly, because I finally understood something. This had never been about cabinets. Not really. The cabinets were only evidence. The real theft had happened much earlier. The theft of trust, the theft of respect, the theft of something far harder to replace. And just like that, everyone in the room understood what I had understood for weeks. Lauren hadn't renovated a kitchen. She had stolen a memory. Nobody called the police that afternoon. Nobody got handcuffed. Nobody delivered a dramatic speech while thunder rolled in the background. Real life rarely works that way. Instead, people stood quietly in Lauren's kitchen while the truth settled over the room. And trust me, truth is heavier than most people expect. The open house ended less than 30 minutes later. The buyers left. The real estate agent left. Jake Mercer left, looking like a man who had suddenly developed several new medical conditions. Tyler disappeared into the backyard. Lauren remained standing beside the island, the same island she had proudly shown off online for months. Now it looked different. Not because the kitchen had changed, because the story had. I remember looking at her and seeing 2 people at the same time. The woman who had stolen from me, and the little girl who once sat at that same kitchen island, helping Maggie decorate Christmas cookies. That's the hardest part about family. The villain and the person you love are often the same person. Rebecca handled the next steps, which was good, because by that point I was emotionally exhausted. Within 48 hours, the listing was withdrawn. The real estate company wanted nothing to do with a property connected to a potential ownership dispute. The buyers vanished immediately, understandably. Nobody wants to purchase legal complications along with a mortgage. The contractor hired his own attorney. The storage company suddenly became extremely cooperative. Amazing how quickly cooperation appears once lawyers become involved. Records surfaced, emails surfaced, invoices surfaced, transportation documents surfaced. Things people claimed not to remember suddenly became very memorable. Funny how that works. Over the next several weeks, the entire story slowly came together. The cabinets had never been disposed of. Of course they hadn't. Lauren had arranged for them to be removed during the house clean-out process. Jake Mercer had agreed to reinstall them in her home. Tyler knew what was happening. Not all of it at first. But enough. Enough to stop it. And he hadn't. That mattered too. The storage company employees assumed everything had been authorized. The contractor convinced himself it wasn't his responsibility to ask questions. Everybody found a way to avoid looking too closely. That's another lesson life teaches eventually. Most bad decisions require assistance, not active participation. Just silence. Just enough silence. Rebecca eventually negotiated a settlement, a complicated one, a very expensive one. When everything was finalized, Lauren agreed to compensate me for the value of the cabinet's installation costs, legal expenses, and related damages. The total came to $31,600. Not enough to erase what happened, enough to acknowledge it. And strangely, the money became the least important part. People always imagine these stories end with financial victory. But money wasn't what I wanted. Not really. I wanted accountability. I wanted honesty. I wanted someone to finally stop pretending. That happened about 3 months later, on a rainy Tuesday evening. My phone rang. Lauren. For several seconds, I considered letting it go to voicemail. Then I answered. Hello? Silence. Not unusual silence. Emotional silence. The kind people create when they're trying to find courage. Finally, she spoke. I'm sorry. 3 words. Simple words. But they carried more weight than the settlement agreement. I didn't answer immediately. Not because I wanted to punish her. Because I didn't know what to say. Eventually, she continued. I kept telling myself it wasn't really stealing. I closed my eyes. She kept talking. I told myself you weren't using them. The same sentence. The sentence that destroyed her story at the open house. Only this time she sounded ashamed instead of defensive. I told myself Mom would have wanted me to have them. That one hurt. A lot. Because Maggie would never have wanted that. Not like this. Not through deception. Not through manipulation. Not through lies. Lauren cried. I listened. For almost an hour. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, she stopped defending herself. No excuses. No explanations. No arguments. Just honesty. Painful honesty. The kind that arrives very late but still matters. Over the following months, I learned something surprising. The open house hadn't only exposed the truth. It had broken something inside Lauren, not permanently, but significantly. She eventually started seeing a therapist. Her marriage nearly collapsed. Tyler moved into a rental apartment for several weeks. The two of them spent months trying to rebuild trust. Sometimes they made progress, sometimes they didn't. Healing isn't linear. Neither is forgiveness. People like simple endings. Real life rarely provides them. A year later, Lauren and I were speaking again. Not the way we once did. Not completely. There were still scars, still uncomfortable moments, still conversations we avoided. But there was effort, and effort matters. One afternoon, she came to visit my condo. No social media posts, no cameras, no audience, just us. We sat at the kitchen table drinking coffee. For a long time, neither of us said much. Then she handed me a small cardboard box. I opened it. Inside were several original brass cabinet handles, unused extras from the 2016 installation, the same backup hardware Maggie had insisted on ordering. Just in case. Maggie always prepared for the future, even when the future turned out strange. Beneath the hardware sat something else, a small cabinet door, one of the original doors removed during later modifications. I stared at it for several seconds. Cherry wood, hand-finished, familiar, a piece of Maggie's kitchen, a piece of our life. Lauren looked down at the table. I thought you should have it. I nodded. Couldn't speak. Not immediately. Sometimes forgiveness begins with small things, a conversation, a gesture, a returned object. Not because the object matters, because the intention does. Today that cabinet door hangs in my workshop, not as a trophy, not as evidence, as a reminder of Maggie, a reminder of what happened, a reminder of what survived, and most importantly, a reminder that truth eventually catches up to people. Not because truth is aggressive, because truth is patient. The cabinets never really mattered, not in the way people think. They were wood, hardware, construction materials, replaceable things. What mattered were the memories attached to them, the years attached to them, the love attached to them. That's what Lauren failed to understand. And that's what she eventually learned, the hard way. The kitchen still exists. The cabinets still exist. The family still exists. Just differently than before. Some things were repaired. Some things weren't. That's the honest ending. Not perfect. Not tragic. Just human. And honestly, after everything that happened, I think Maggie would have preferred that. Because she always believed people deserved a second chance. Just not a free one. Life lesson. If there's one thing I hope you take from this story, it's this. Never confuse kindness with weakness. Good people often stay quiet longer than others. They give second chances. They try to see the best in people. They avoid conflict whenever possible. But boundaries matter. Truth matters. And protecting yourself doesn't make you cruel. It makes you responsible. Sometimes the people who hurt us aren't strangers. They're people we love, people we trust, people we never expected to disappoint us. That reality is painful. But pretending it isn't true only makes the damage worse. The other lesson is this: greed rarely destroys people all at once. It happens one small justification at a time. One excuse, one shortcut, one rationalization, until eventually a person can't recognize themselves anymore. And finally, remember this. The truth doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need revenge. It doesn't need anger. Most of the time it just needs patience, because sooner or later people reveal themselves. If this story meant something to you, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. Drop a comment below and tell us, have you ever been in a situation like this? We read every single one. And as always, thank you for being a part of this.